Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Football House Show. I'm Sam Basil, joined alongside Gracie Marks and Cole Hughes. It is week 11 of the 2023 college football season. We've gotten our second round of college football playoff rankings officially from the committee. And we've got a lot of great games, a couple really interesting situations in, conference championship game selections. A couple teams could pretty much clinch a spot in their conference championship game this weekend. But overall, still we've got a really great slate and some really interesting challenges for some potential college football playoff teams. So, guys, I want to start off. How are you guys doing? How are you feeling about the current state of college football at this point in the season?
Yeah, good. I mean, we're getting down to the wire. It's that time of year, so excited. A lot of good games left on the slate. But like you said, I mean, we're getting into the part of the year now where conference championships are on the horizon right there, and it's going to be intriguing to see, what teams can make it and what can, and see how bowl season kind of shapes up.
Absolutely. And Gracie, we haven't seen you in a while on the show, but we've been getting your picks all season. I know USC, their season has not shaped up to what we really wanted it to be. Could you kind of give the state of your view of the USC fan base and what you could possibly be looking forward to either with USC or just with the college football season in general?
Yeah, I mean, definitely really disappointing. We all know the defense absolutely stinks, like the worst of all time. Like, I would bet my life savings on like the opposing team total every single week. But they did fire Alex Grinch on Monday, who was the defensive coordinator for USC. That people were very, very happy. I think it's too late. Like, in my opinion, they should have done it honestly after the Cotton Bowl last year or very early this season. It's a good first step. I also think like the guys that are taking over for him, I think Alex Grinch is a complete moron, but I think it's also a personnel problem where the guys he brought in are, taking over for him now. So they all kind of operate under the same brain. I think they're all stupid. So I think you got to kind of like just clear house with anybody that Alex Grinch brought in when he came in with Lincoln Riley. So I think the thing to look forward to would just be who they hire after this year at defensive coordinator and just kind of move from there. But the firing was definitely exciting, but I think just a couple months too late.
Absolutely. And so now for them, I mean, obviously the season started off with not just college football playoff hopes, but national championship hopes. What is a satisfying ending to USC season, if you could even find one? Like, what level bowl would you really be looking for here?
I mean, I guess like I'm trying to think like they're going to be in a bad bowl, like whatever that one is in Vegas. I like the Pinstripe Bowl, like one of those. I don't like. It's going to be bad. I was like reading this thing. It was like they should just match up like USC and Iowa against each other for a bowl game because because they would still let Iowa score. Like that's how bad their defense is Iowa would put up like 30 on USC's defense. But I mean, yeah, they're going to be in a pretty low whatever, like the Outback Bowl, one of those Liberty Bowl, the LA Bowl. I think the Holiday Bowl is probably, I'm guessing, because that's a Pac-12 bowl, and I'm guessing that's where they'll end up is the Holiday Bowl against some shitty team. But yeah, not great. Really, just overall, like Caleb Williams shouldn't play. Head should be low, and I mean, it's just complete failure.
Well, let's see where things stand. Obviously, USC is not in our top 25 this week, nor were they in the college football playoff official top 25, I believe. Yep, they completely dropped. The USC did get some votes. They were kind of on the lower end, right next to, as you said, maybe a potential bowl opponent this year in Iowa. But let's kind of focus on the top here. Our top 7 actually remain unchanged. Our college football playoff projections obviously being Georgia, Michigan, Ohio State, and Florida State, respectively. The College Football Playoff Committee, their latest top 25 featured pretty much the same 4 teams, but they had Ohio State and Georgia flipped. We talked about this last week, but I wanted to get your opinion on it, Gracie. We've kind of all felt like Georgia has been the number 1 team throughout the season. They have been number 1, at least in our poll, pretty much the entire time. They are still the AP number 1 team. But when it comes to Ohio State and, why we think the committee has given them the number 1 ranking 2 weeks in a row now, it really comes down to, they've probably played out of the 4 college football playoff teams so far the toughest schedule, and they've gotten wins against some really tough teams. That Penn State win, the Notre Dame win. Do you feel like Ohio State deserves to be the number 1 team, or do you feel like, do you buy into the philosophy of Georgia started off the season number 1, they should stay number 1 until they mess up?
Yeah, I'm on that train. I think Georgia should stay number 1 till they lose, and then Ohio State 2, Michigan 3. I just think with the strength of schedule, Ohio State, like you said, they beat Notre Dame, they beat Penn State. If Michigan beats Penn State on the road, then that's time to have a different conversation. But Michigan has had the easiest joke of a schedule until this week when they're playing Penn State. This is like their actual first big test, and Ohio State already has 2 ranked wins, so I would put Ohio State 2, Michigan 3, and then Florida State.
Absolutely. And say Michigan, they come out of this unscathed, against Penn State. This is also for Cole as well. Do you guys feel like the Michigan Ohio State game should pretty much determine who gets into the college football playoff? Do you feel like there's a path for this Michigan Ohio State game to happen and one of them to lose? I mean, look, we've seen it in the past before, but do you think this year, based on how these teams have played, the teams they've played, the loser of Michigan Ohio State could still make the college football playoff?
Yeah, I mean, well, I think if Michigan loses, that's going to hurt them a lot, just because, like you guys have been saying, they haven't really had a tough schedule this year. I mean, yes, they have Penn State this week, but if they lose to Ohio State, I think that kind of knocks them out just with the other teams that are on the outside looking in right now. I do think if Ohio State loses to Michigan and it's a close game, they keep it close and they lose by, less than a touchdown or something like that, I could see the committee keeping them in the top 4 just because of all the wins that they've had. But I think if Michigan loses, that's going to knock them out. But I'm not sure about Ohio State yet.
Absolutely. And look, we've still got a couple weeks to go before that game, and I think we are all, I don't want to speak for you guys, but I feel like I'm pretty excited for that game. So before we get into that game, 2 weeks from now, let's kind of go through everybody's cards. Gracie, if you want to give your thoughts on your card this week, starting off with your FBS and FCS locks of the week, then your regular picks, and then hold off on your game of the week.
For sure. My FBS lock is Oregon State versus Stanford. That should be really easy. Oregon State's having a really solid year. They should take care of Stanford very easily. Washington minus 9.5 versus Utah. I mean, I love Washington. Utah is going on the road. I don't know if it's 9.5 now, but Michael Penix Jr. is having an insane year at home. I like them to literally steamroll Utah. I think they're not even remotely in the same ballpark. And Utah's whole quarterback situation is very questionable. So I'm taking Washington minus 9.5 at home. Then I'm taking Oklahoma first half -6 versus West Virginia. Oklahoma, they've lost 2 in a row. They're at home now versus West Virginia. I'd like them to bounce back this week big time against a pretty mediocre West Virginia team. They've lost 2 straight, and this was a team that was ranked like 6, I think, at one point, and were like really playing really well. So I do like them to bounce back at home. Then I'm taking the Oregon team total over 45.5 at home versus USC. Oregon is playing some of the best football in the country and is very like I would say Washington's clearly number 1, but Oregon is like a close second. They're both playing really good football. I think honestly this could hit in the first half. The over 45.5. It's minus 130. I think it's like this could easily hit in the first half. And I know like they fired Alex Grinch, and like some people might say, oh, like the defense could have like like have a whole bounce back because he's fired and feel motivated. But no, like they stink. Like I said, it's a personnel problem, not an Alex Grinch problem. So I'm taking the team total over 45.5. That was the lowest. It like at minus 130, the rest were at plus value. So I'm going to take that. Like I really think it could hit in the first half. I'm expecting them to score 65 points in that range. I think the total was at 73.5. It wasn't on my card, but I was debating it. Like last week I took the Washington USC over and it was so high and I was like a little bit nervous, and then it like basically hit in the first half and I was like, this is like so easy. But yeah, so I'm taking the team total and then that's it. Besides my game of the week.
Fantastic. Really solid card. I like the Pac-12 sampler that we got there. It seems like you're pretty high on Michael Penix, right? And obviously, like we've talked about earlier in the season, I mean, it seems like Oregon is really trying to make a push for a Bo Nix Heisman campaign. If you don't feel comfortable making a prediction for a specific player, do you feel like we're pretty much running away with the fact that the Heisman Trophy is going to come out of the Pac-12 this year?
Sorry. Yeah, I mean, I think it's going to be one of them. It's either going to be Bo Nix or Michael Penix, which is honestly insane because I think nobody gave Bo Nix a chance at the beginning of the season. And yeah, I mean, I'm looking at their odds right now. Like Michael Penix plus 150, Bo Nix is plus 200, and then JJ McCarthy is plus 800. If like Michigan loses, he's done. So it's like I think it's really just going to be a battle, the two of them pretty much. But I think Michael Penix is kind of running away with it, especially if Washington goes undefeated.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so great card. Love your picks. Cole, what you got for us?
All right, I got a stacked card this week. I'm trying to, work my way up the standings. It hasn't been helping, so why not throw more picks on there? But I'm going to start with Friday night. We got a nice little matchup between SMU and North Texas. I'm going to take SMU minus 17. I know it's a lot, but I really like the way that they've been playing this year. Currently in grad school at SMU's program. So, pony up, go Mustangs. They got a 5-game win streak going into this game. They've been averaging like over 50 points the last 3 games, putting up a ton of points. Their defense has also been balling out. They're only averaging, I think, like 16 points per game this year. The one note that sticks out to me for SMU is their red zone efficiency. They've been in the red zone 35 times, and they've gotten points 32 out of those 35 times. So pretty incredible. It's over 90% efficiency rating in the red zone. So hopefully they can keep that up, run it up against North Texas and win by a couple touchdowns. So I'll take them minus 17. My next pick, I went back and forth on this one. I really don't feel great about it, but something's telling me to do it. Boston College Eagles plus 1.5 against Virginia Tech. BC's had a kind of surprising year. They started out slow, 1-3, and now they're 6-3. So, they're another team that's won 5 in a row. I like the way they've been playing. They've kind of found their groove. Another team, you just look at their stats. I mean, they're 13th in time of possession with the ball. So, the more you have the ball, the more likelihood you're going to win the game, right? Control the clock. So hopefully they can do that against Virginia Tech. VT's 0-4 on the road this year. They're going to Chestnut Hill this weekend to play BC. So, I like the Eagles' chances there. And another stat that kind of stuck out to me was BC, they've gone for it on fourth down a ton this year, like more than any team in the country. I think they're tied for first in most attempts. They're 22 for 30 on fourth down. So, they're not afraid to take chances. I kind of like it. It's ballsy. I think that, all their games this year in the ACC have been somewhat close. So I'm going to take the Eagles to keep rolling against the Hokies and take them plus 1.5. I got Old Dominion plus 13.5 against Liberty. Liberty's had a great year. I don't want to show them any disrespect. I think they're a great team. Old Dominion, if you just look at their schedule this year, another team that plays teams very close. When they lose or win, really, it's not by many points. They've had a lot of decisions decided by, a touchdown or less. The last 2 weeks, they've played some good teams in James Madison and Coastal Carolina, two teams that, are having good years, and they've kept it close. They lost to JMU by 3, 30-27, lost to Coastal by 4. So, I think that trend continues. I think Liberty wins the game. They remain undefeated, but I do think that Old Dominion's going to sneak in on them, surprise a lot of people, and keep that game close. So 13.5, it's a lot. I'm going to take Old Dominion there. I got Kansas and Texas Tech in the Big 12. I'm going to take Kansas -5, a team that, has kind of been surprising this year. They, are averaging over 35 points a game on offense. Their quarterback, Jalen Daniels, he went down, but their backup, Jason Bean, he's stepped in and kind of hasn't missed a beat. He's been doing pretty well. They beat Oklahoma a couple of weeks ago in that big upset win. I think they've been rolling since then, kind of just a motivating factor to keep them going. They have Kansas State the week after this. So I think it's a big week for them this week to take care of Texas Tech, because that Kansas State game, that rivalry game, interstate rivalry, is going to be a tough matchup for the Jayhawks. So I'll take them -5. And another thing to point out is right now they're 7-2, which is almost unheard of for a Kansas football team. If they can win out, they'll get double-digit wins this year. And that hasn't happened, or it's only happened twice in the last 30 years of their program. So that's something that they're shooting for. They could potentially make one of those New Year's 6 bowl games if they win out. So they have some motivational factors on their side. So I'm going to take them -5. Missouri and Tennessee, another great matchup this week in the SEC. Two teams that have been kind of electric this year, have surprised a lot of people. Tennessee had a really good year last year. They lost Hendon Hooker. Joe Milton's came in, and they kind of haven't slowed down at all. I like Mizzou. There are only 2 losses this year against an LSU team that's really good in the SEC, and then Georgia. They only lost to Georgia by 9 last week. So Mizzou can hang with the big boys for sure. You look at Missouri's offense, and I think they have like a triple threat there between their quarterback, their running back, and their lead receiver. Brady Cook, their running back, he has a QBR right now of 77.4, which is 18th in the entire country. That's pretty good. When you look at all these quarterbacks around college football, for Missouri to have a QB in the top 20 teams, it's pretty impressive. Their running back, Cody Schrader, he's got 10 rushing touchdowns on the year, almost averaging or over averaging 1 touchdown per game. So they can run it. And then their lead receiver, Luther Burden III, he's got 958 reception yards on 64 grabs. So he's averaging 15 yards per reception, which is kind of crazy numbers, and a stat that a lot of NFL teams will be looking at. So I think this game just comes down to what quarterback plays better. Is it Milton or is it Cook? Who makes less mistakes? I'm going to go with Missouri at home. So I'm going to take the money line for the Tigers over the Tennessee Vols. What else do I have? I got Washington and Utah, the over. I first started at 52.5. It's gone down to 49.5. I feel like these two teams, even though Utah, Cam Rising hasn't been playing, we've talked a little bit about this on the show this year. Their backup quarterbacks have stepped up. They've had a pretty decent year. Washington, one of the best offenses in the entire country. I feel like whether it's 49.5, 52.5, whatever, I would take the over on either. I just feel like that's not that many points, and these two Pac-12 schools can put up a lot of points. So I feel like that's a good a bet there. I got Iowa and Rutgers, a Big Ten matchup. Really interesting. I mean, we've talked a little about it tonight. Iowa, not known for their offense. They really cannot put up points. I think they're averaging 18 points a game on offense, which is just brutal. But it's working for them. They're at the top of their division in the Big Ten. The last 3 games they haven't even surpassed 15 points, which is kind of crazy. But I like Rutgers in this game, plus 1.5, just because, look, Rutgers is a good team. I know Iowa is too, but if Iowa's defense can't stop Rutgers, I just think Rutgers is going to put up too many points for Iowa to keep up. Rutgers is 6-3, but their 3 losses come to 3 pretty good teams in the Big Ten: Ohio State, Michigan, and Wisconsin. So, I just feel like there's a lot of pressure on Iowa right now, being at the top of their division, trying to hold on to that spot. I feel like this is just an upset in the making for Rutgers. So I like them there. I mean, if you look at Iowa for how many points they've scored in the entire year, it's 81 points that they've gotten for them. They're at the first place in their division, like I said. Michigan State has the same amount of points for them, and they're in last place in their division. So, wow. The only difference is that Iowa has only let up 86 points, right? So it's really their defense that has been keeping them in games. I think if their defense shows up again this week, it'll be a tough matchup for Rutgers, but it's asking a lot, and this defense has consistently been doing it for them. I just don't know if they hold up against this Rutgers team. So I'm going to take Rutgers plus 1.5, and those are my picks. And I have my locks too. Sorry, a lot of picks. Texas versus TCU. Texas is favored by 10. I'm taking them in a little teaser, 7 points. They're fighting to stay in the playoff picture. They pretty much have to win out at this point. So, TCU isn't going to go easily. Sonny Dykes, obviously a great coach. Last year they were in the national championship. I don't think they're just going to roll over to Texas, but I do like the Longhorns to beat them by at least a touchdown. So I'm buying a couple points from 10-7, taking the Longhorns there. And then my FCS lock of the week is going to be Colgate against Lehigh. Colgate, gritty team. I mean, they started out the year terribly. They were 0-4 to start the year. And I have a couple buddies actually that are from Colgate, and, they played football there back in the day. And, they didn't feel too confident about this team this season, but, they've come back to 4-5 after starting 0-4. So, that's pretty gritty for them to be in that spot, especially where they started. Lehigh's 2-7. So, I think if Colgate has one more win in them, it's against this Lehigh team. They do have Fordham the last week of the year, which is going to be a tough matchup for them. So, 5-6, because they're not going to beat Fordham, is better than 4-6. So get that win against Lehigh. So I'm going to take Colgate money line in that matchup. And those are my picks.
Yeah, that Patriot League, man, it's a tough league, especially this year. Right. I feel like these past, 5-6 years, it's the question has kind of been, who's going to challenge Holy Cross. But then Lafayette did it. Right. They were able to do it. They beat Holy Cross. And then the next week, Holy Cross beat Fordham. And now Fordham's coming up against Lafayette. So it might, it's going to create like kind of this circle of suck, that people like to talk about, when it comes to NFL football, right? I think we just completed the NFL circle maybe like 2 or 3 weeks ago. But that league, 7 teams where, I think it's a quality league in terms of the FCS, but when you have a league like the Valley Conference, right, that's pretty much constantly taking all of those at-large bids, you have to go almost perfect to get an FCS playoff spot. And every single game that you go through in league play there is a gauntlet. So I like how you're giving some light to the Patriot League. Always fun to watch. A couple teams that I want to really point out, and I feel like they're teams that we've definitely been talking about throughout the season. Kansas, Mizzou, Kansas, Mizzou, Rutgers, and Iowa, right? 4 teams where I feel like the past 2-3 years have really emerged in their conferences, but they have never been able to, really be in the conversation for the best team in the conference. Even with a team like Iowa, who was kind of, I feel like 3 years ago was, in the top 5 conversation. They've made the Big Ten championship game, but these teams have really been living in the shadow of the Ohio States, the Michigans, the Alabamas, and the Georgias of the world, right? And even, with Kansas in the Big 12, the Oklahomas and the Texases of the world, right? Still very exciting teams to watch. I feel like people really love watching Rutgers this year. Heading into the offseason, what do these coaches and programs and athletic directors need to do to sustain this success and possibly take these teams to the next level within their own conferences? Because obviously these guys aren't moved. They're not shifting conferences. These are the conferences that teams are coming into, right? The Big Ten, the ACC, the Big 12, the SEC. What is the next step in building a program like this at that level where they are right now?
Yeah, I think it depends on the team, right? For teams like Missouri and Rutgers, unfortunately, I think no matter what they do, their conferences that they're in are just so stacked. And like you said, even teams are coming in now, right? So it's just tough for these type of programs, right? Because you're facing perennial powerhouses, week in and week out. So, they could even, they're going to have better recruiting classes after these last couple of years, which, is great for them. But I just think like for Rutgers and Missouri, it's always going to be a battle. It's going to be tough just because the amount of talent that is around them that they have to face. But if you look at Kansas, right, and Iowa, I think Kansas has the best opportunity, right, because you have Texas and Oklahoma leaving to go to the SEC. Yes, you do have teams coming in from the Pac-12 to the Big 12, but I think Kansas could stay there, could stay at the top if they have a good recruiting class, and if their coach Lance Leipold stays there, he's done great with that program. So I do think that there is potential there for Kansas to remain at the top, or kind of be like a team like Kansas State or TCU, and 1 year they just pop off and they run the table and they're playing in the conference championship, and potentially, with now more teams getting into the college football playoff, they could sneak into, a 7 or 8 spot, maybe. I think that's their ultimate ceiling. And then Iowa, Iowa just needs to focus on their offense. They've been a defensive team for years. And, it works for them. They don't let up a lot of points, but they would win so many more games and, have such better records at the end of the year if they could just get some weapons on the offensive side of the ball. I know they're tight end university, which is absolutely true. They produced a ton of tight ends in the NFL, but, one guy isn't going to do it. You need, talent at the quarterback position. You need multiple receivers. So I think that's what they need to focus on there. That would be my takeaway for each of those teams.
And looking into the rest of the decade, Gracie, it seems like the Big 12, obviously you've got Texas and Oklahoma leaving to go to the SEC. That is, their biggest departure. But when it comes to, the dissolution of the Pac-12, they're getting the Big 12 is getting a lot of teams coming in. And it feels like it's been kind of Texas and Oklahoma on and off for a long time with that conference. TCU thrown in the mix there. So Gracie, do you feel like the Big 12 could be, in the second half of this decade, the most contentious conference in college football year in and year out?
Yeah, I'm looking at Texas and what's his name is coming in. The Manning brother is going to be playing
Archie.
for Texas. Yeah, after next year or the year after. And it's very similar to like, I guess, like the Bronny James, like the hype is going to be insane for any Texas game. And like, so I don't really see any like hype or, I think it's always going to be, it's always going to run through them. Oklahoma. Yeah. I mean, I think Texas in the next 2-3 years will be like peak hype, with Arch Manning like coming in, and like can imagine it's probably going to be pretty insufferable once he starts playing. But yeah, I think it will still run through Texas.
But I'm saying after they go to the SEC,
Oh,
like who's kind of filling that gap in the Big 12 now? Is it running through anybody, or is it just going to be a dogfight every single year?
yeah, I think it's just going to be a dogfight, honestly. It will be interesting to see how the recruiting turns out once Texas departs. Like I haven't looked at like any recruiting that far, but it will be interesting to see like how the recruiting works and like what ends up being the school that, most people want to go to in the Big 12. Like that will be interesting to see. Um I want to say Kansas, but they're kind of like up and down. But I think the future is bright, but yeah, I think it's pretty wide open.
Absolutely. So I'll get into my card here. Pretty small card. I think there's a couple games that I really like on here. A couple weird spreads, in my opinion. There's one specifically that I'm going to mention here. First off, I was waiting to put this game on my card for many, many weeks now. And when when it first popped up, I was really excited because I thought it was going to be a much more important game nationally than it has turned out to be. And that is UNC versus Duke. Obviously, this was kind of a breakout year in the beginning for both of these programs. They were both kind of frequently in the top 25, but a couple weird losses, and then the true emergence of Florida State and Louisville kind of sneaking their way up there through the ACC as well. Just pushed both of these historic usually basketball rivals, just down the ranks, out of the top 25. I think they're completely out of our top 25, if that's true. No, North Carolina is back. They're 24th in our rankings, but Duke has not been seen for a couple weeks now. So I still think UNC is the much better team. They're the much better coach team. They're a high-powered offensive team. So that's why I'm taking them in the money line, and I'm going to have the over at 50.5. That's for the game total, but UNC's offense has been steamrolling lately. I don't know if you saw. I mean, I know they played Campbell last week, but I mean they could possibly hit the over all on their own against Duke. A really weird spread in my opinion here. Fresno State versus San Jose State in a trophy game called the Battle for the Valley. San Jose State's getting a point on Fresno in this one. I think the books are looking at the home team to be the favorite, but I think Fresno State is they're still a serious contender for the Mountain West now that Air Force has kind of proven that they're not completely untouchable. They lost to Army last week, which is great, by the way. If I can go off on a little tangent here, because with Army's win, well, I mean, it's not great if you're an Air Force fan, I guess, but with Army's win over Air Force and Air Force's win over Navy, a couple weeks back, Army now has a chance to clinch the Commander-in-Chief's trophy at the Army-Navy game this year. But for those of you who are still following, I know this can be a bit of a confusing trophy. If Navy beats Army at the Army-Navy game this year, that means every team has beaten each other in a kind of a triangular motion, and Air Force retains the trophy. So just getting that out there. Either way, Fresno State money line over San Jose State. LSU, I got them minus 14.5. I just feel like they're gonna come off this this loss to Alabama last week. It wasn't great, but I don't think Florida is really the team that we kind of wanted them to be this year for kind of the second year in a row. I think Florida's got a really tough schedule for the rest of the year. So I'm going to take the Tigers at minus 15.5. My FBS lock of the week, I'm going for the other Florida team, the one that's trying to make the college football playoff, and one that pretty much clinches, they definitely clinch because with this game, if they win against Miami, they will be 8-0 in ACC play, and they will absolutely have a spot in the ACC championship game, and that's obviously Florida State at minus 14. For my FCS lock of the pick, I kind of teased it earlier when we were talking about Colgate, but I've got Fordham over Lafayette in the Patriot League. With that win, if Fordham wins this one, they go up to 3-2 in Patriot League play. Lafayette falls to 3-2, and that pretty much gives Holy Cross a shot. I think that pretty much gives Holy Cross the Patriot League title, unless Lafayette comes away with a win. Then they, it all depends on who's beating who there. But yeah, that's my card. Let's get into our game of the week. I think it's a really good one. We kind of teased it a little bit when we were talking about the criteria for picking the number one team at this point in the season, and that is obviously Georgia versus Ole Miss. With Ole Miss being the 9th ranked team in the country, this is obviously Georgia's biggest game so far. This is their best opponent so far. And I feel like the consensus has been maybe Georgia is not the team that we thought they were going to be. They've kind of had some injuries. They've had some injury struggles. Their wins have not been like knock your socks off impressive, but at the same time, those wins are still wins. So this is going to be finally the time where we can actually see what Georgia does against a top 10 opponent, and really, throw these criteria discussions out the window, right? So, guys, what are you looking for in this game? How do you think this is going to go? Who's going to win? And what's the spread? Starting off, or who do you think will take this against the spread? Starting off with you, Cole.
Yeah, so I think I'm going to shock a lot of people with my pick this week, but I am going to take actually Ole Miss. I think the spread is 11?
10.5.
10.5. Yeah. So I'm going to take Ole Miss plus 10.5. And I'm also going to take them to win this game. It's crazy. I know Georgia has been the top dog, no pun intended, for a long time now, but I don't know. I like this Ole Miss team. I think they are well coached. Lane Kiffin has done a great job there. I think their offense is really good. And I don't know. It's going to be a top tier offense against a top tier defense. Does Georgia's quarterback Carson Beck does he have enough to outdo this Ole Miss team? I'm not sure. I don't know. I think it's going to be a very close game, closer than what people are expecting. And if any team is going to knock off Georgia at this point for the rest of the year before the conference championship, it's going to be Ole Miss. So I don't know. Something's telling me go Rebels. So I'm taking the Rebels, and we'll see what happens. They might get smoked, but I'm going to go out on a limb and take Ole Miss.
All right. Cole's going for the underdogs here. I think it's important to note that with their loss to Alabama earlier in the season, Ole Miss they're not out of the SEC championship race, but they're not in control of their own destiny, right? They're 5-1 in the SEC West. So this could be, just a narrative nation game, right? So, Gracie, how do you think this game's going to go, and what is Ole Miss playing for here against Georgia?
Yeah, I'm taking Georgia straight up. Like I don't trust Jackson Dart on the road at a night game in Athens on their senior night. I can't bet on Jackson Dart. I can't do it. So I'm taking Georgia at home, like I said, under the lights. It's going to be I think it will be close. Like Cole said, I don't think this is going to be blowout by any means. I think last week they struggled as well against Missouri. I think I had think I had the spread and they didn't cover. So they struggled last week. I think, like you guys said, they're obviously, dominant, but they're not as dominant as we've been expecting. And I guess they're not they're kind of due for a stinker, but I still not going to bet on Jackson Dart on the road. Like, it's just not happening. And at night, like in Athens. So yeah, I'm going to take Georgia straight up. I think they get it done. And like you said, Ole Miss doesn't control their own destiny. They need Alabama to lose to make it to the SEC championship game. So I feel like they don't really, like, because they don't control their own destiny, they don't really have anything to lose either, but I think it will be a lot closer. If I took the spread, I'd probably take Ole Miss plus 11.5. It's a lot of points, and I think it's going to be closer, but I think Georgia will win.
Yeah, another reason why I'm taking Ole Miss is just because, like, I don't know. I've watched Georgia a lot this year, and look, they're a hell of a team. But a lot of these games that they've ended up winning, obviously they're undefeated, right? But they started off slow in the first half, and I don't think you can do that against Ole Miss. Like, Ole Miss could put up a lot of points quickly, and if you get down early against Ole Miss, I think that's going to be a hell of a hole to dig yourself out of. Just looking at some of these games that Georgia have played, they beat South Carolina by 10, but that was a close game at the beginning of that game. Even the UAB game, that's a no-name team, and they kind of struggled with them early on. They only beat Auburn by 7 points. The Kentucky game was kind of beginning. It started off kind of, hand in hand, and then they started pulling away. And then, Missouri last week, they only beat them by 9. So, like Gracie's saying, I get it. They're at home. It is their senior night. I don't know. I just think that they are due for an upset, and I like Ole Miss. I don't know why. I like them.
Gracie, you mentioned that Georgia is kind of due for a stinker, and there were a couple years, towards the end of the 2010s. It was in 2018 and 2019 where they were pretty much setting themselves up to be college football playoff teams, right? And then they lost in 2 consecutive SEC championship games against Alabama and then against Joe Burrow's LSU. Do you feel like something like that could be brewing again this year with this year's Alabama team? Or, I feel like, too, what's crazy about this, too, is that if this is the game where Georgia loses, there's a possibility, because there's no way a loss for Georgia here gets them out of the SEC championship game, because they're just so much better than everybody else in their own division. So I just want to say, like, could this stinker that they put up be against Alabama or Ole Miss again in the SEC championship game?
Yeah, I think it's like, I'm not like, if we get Georgia, Alabama, like, I'm not complaining. I think that's the best, even though it's the same thing every year. Like, I get it, but it's the most entertaining. And the thing that the thing that I keep an eye on the most would be the Alabama defense. They are so good defensively, and I think that they would give Georgia a run for their money. I'd probably take the Alabama spread if they did match up in the SEC title game. But yeah, I don't know. I just feel like we're like creeping up on a Georgia loss. Like, it's gonna happen. I don't think this week, but because I'm taking Georgia. But like, I think, like what Cole said, we're kind of like creeping up. Like, they will fall eventually, and they've slowly kind of they're getting worse. Like the Missouri game, they didn't look good. The Florida game, I will admit, they did look really good. They were pretty dominant the entire game. I took Georgia minus 14. They easily covered against Florida. But the other games, it's like, they haven't had that like real like staple win where I'm like, wow, this is like, this is like the best team, they're going all the way. Like, I think like Cole is kind of right. They're due for a loss, and it's like it's very slow, but like they're slowly starting to get worse and worse, and like slowly starting to crumble. So we'll see. It easily could be this week, but I think my bet would be the SEC title game.
I like that. I think I'm going to be in agreement with you here. I don't think I'm going to take Georgia against the spread. I'm not going to take anybody against the spread here. I'm just going to go Georgia money line, keep it simple. I think one thing that Georgia kind of has in their favor, and I think we've talked about it this year, is that they really do like dominate when it comes to like time of possession, right? And I think that could be it's tough because I feel like it's like when you dominate time of possession, right? Do you want to go up against a punchy team like Ole Miss? Because Ole Miss is a pretty fast working team. I mean, look at that Tulane game, right? Earlier or like pretty early in the year. They are fast moving offense. They can put up a lot of points pretty quickly. But if Georgia just denies them those opportunities, then I think we will see like a 7, 8, 9 point win, and then setting up, whatever happens in an eventual SEC championship game.
I do think too a big X factor is Brock Bowers. Does he play in this game?
Yes.
If he's out, I mean that obviously helps Ole Miss. But if he comes back, then they might be in a little bit of trouble. But yeah. I'm banking on the fact that he's not playing because I think they want to keep him for the postseason. So
yeah, that's a fair take. That wraps up our planned out cards. Any other games that on Saturday's slate or even on maybe Friday's slate that catch your guys' eye?
Something that catches my eye right now, all of a sudden, Louisville's playing tonight against Virginia. They were up 14-0. It's almost the end of the third quarter, and that's a tie ball game. So that's something to keep an eye out on. A lot of good games on the slate this week. I really like the Miami-Florida State game. I think Florida State ends up winning it and remains undefeated in the ACC, but Miami's no team to just push over. I mean, they could ball out too. So I think that'll be a tight one.
Penn State, Michigan.
That's a huge one, right? With huge implications for the Big Ten standings and the college football playoff. Alabama and Kentucky. Kentucky's another, I think Alabama wins that game, but Kentucky is, not a bad team. You got Arizona and Colorado. What does Colorado do? You don't know what you're going to get each week with that team. Arizona's had a pretty good year. So, does Colorado's woes continue or do they, turn it around towards the end of the year and try to sneak into a bowl game?
Absolutely. Yeah, a lot of good stuff this week. We're getting so close to conference championship season. I almost like the conference championship point of the year almost as much as I like the first couple games of bowl season. Because it has so many. It breaks the momentum of so many teams. Like I feel like we've seen in the past. I don't want to keep ragging on them because I feel like we'll it'll be like one of our top cold takes. But I feel like it happens to Georgia, right? I mean, they're a perfect example of these teams that can get all the way to the conference championship game and then just fall flat. But that's our show this week. A lot of great picks, a lot of great football on the way, and a lot of great content on the way from the Football House Enterprise, and as college basketball season starting up, the House of College Hoops. So make sure you keep checking house-enterprise.com. Follow us at House Enterprise on Twitter. And until then, we'll see you guys next time.